Hey folks, Eddie from Totally Wired Guitars here, and in light of the unexpected but also overwhelmingly positive responses I got on my last video, in which I cover that surprising $589 Fender Jazzmaster killer, the Foals FJM7 Ultra, that I would make a video to answer a lot of the DMs and messages that I've been getting from folks regarding what mods and upgrades are actually compatible with this thing. And despite the fact that this was a really phenomenal guitar, after giving it a basic setup and sorting out an issue that I had with the vibrato out of the box, my own curiosity from all those questions on what is actually compatible with this led me to actually go ahead and fully upgrade this thing myself. And so today I'm going to be covering everything from low lift mods, such as swapping out your tremolo arm and three-way toggle switch tips, your knobs, your pickup covers, whether or not there's anything that you can do to improve the already fantastic vibrato that comes on this thing, such as what kinds of springs are compatible with this. And also, despite me really digging that stock Foals F3 bridge that came on here, I'm going to also share with you all of the various bridges that I tried to fit on this thing, let you know what actually works without having to extract the stock thimbles here, everything from the budget price tier all the way to the highest end ones that you can get currently in the aftermarket. I'm also going to be answering the most common question, which is, do US spec or AVRI spec pickguards fit on the Foals FJM7? And as you can see, I do have a new pickguard on this, and I'm going to let you know whether or not this was a drop-in or what kind of work it took to actually get this thing to fit. A couple of other things that I wanted to clarify in this video that I didn't cover in the last one was things like the capacitor values and the values of the stock pots and cap up in the rhythm circuit, as well as some keen-eyed folks had noticed not only a slight difference in the construction of the stock JM7 pickups that came in this, but they also noticed that it did sound a bit different. So I'm going to be showing you all today what this thing sounds like now that they are back to the 1 meg Jazzmaster spec, and also what this guitar sounds like with more vintage accurate Jazzmaster pickups, courtesy of our friends over at Tone Hatch Pickups. Another question that I've gotten a couple of times now is whether the locking tuners here are a standard, Kluson / Goto vintage style spec, and whether those are drop-in. And so I have put Goto SD91s on here, and I'm going to be letting you know what it took to actually get those installed. And then lastly, because this is still primarily a budget guitar, only $89 more than a brand new Squier Classic Vibe from Fender, I wanted to try to see if I could make this thing a lot better while spending as little money as possible. And I tried to make that target $1,000 total for both the guitar and all of the mods that went into it. So in the end, I'm going to share with you all of my final choices as far as upgrades went, and if they were even actually worth it, especially because I went about this not because I felt the need to upgrade it, but more so out of my own curiosity and to be able to answer all of your questions based on actual real world experience. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to start off with the most low lift, easy to do mods. And before even dismantling, the first thing that I was able to check was which tremolo arm tips are compatible with this. And when I broke out my calipers, I discovered that this is essentially just shy of a 5mm tremolo arm. And so this is a metric spec, the same on a lot of the imported guitars, Squier included. And so this is not technically a push-on tip, but it does work with the 5mm push-on tips that are most common that you can find from places like Amazon or Reverb. I ended up putting a black one here. This was a 5mm spec tip. And the very end of the arm actually has just a tiny bit of threading. It does not have as much thread as, say, an American vintage reissue arm or the arms that are coming with the Vintera models. And so that usually is enough to actually keep those push-on tips on there nice and tight. So yeah, don't be buying those pure vintage Fender Jazzmaster tremolo arm tips or even the Strat ones. You are going to need an import spec. Same thing with the stock switch. This is also a metric spec tip. I usually just have both metric and imperial, the ones that work with your US spec Switchcraft three-way toggle switches, and those unfortunately did not fit on the stock three-way toggle. So you are going to need a metric spec for that one. Now, because this came with CTS pots from the factory, your typical push-on knobs for American spec, guitars, such as these black Strat knobs that I've got on here currently, are going to be compatible with this guitar. Also, the last thing is that the Foals JM7 pickups are the standard specs. So pretty much every Jazzmaster covered, I tried the genuine Fender ones, the ones that you can currently buy from All Parts. All of those pickup covers actually worked on here. Now from there, I uninstalled the Vibrato on here so that I would be able to access the rest of the, the parts of this guitar, such as the bridge and also eventually underneath the pickguard. And then from there, I was just curious to see if the spring and also the tension screw that is used to set the tension on this Vibrato was the same spec and size as a genuine Fender spring, and I was glad to find that it was. I actually had been saving for some time a spring that I had bought a while back, which is one of the black springs from one of those coveted patent pending tremolo springs from a genuine vintage Fender Jazzmaster, and that actually fit in here, a Squire screw and also retaining nut, that little cone-like nut that's used to keep that spring in place, are all universally compatible with this. So if you end up purchasing, for whatever reason, you just wanted to experiment with springs, they are all compatible here. And I do have the stock full spring handy here, and I will just go ahead and give you some measurements on that. And so that spring is just about 0.578 inches or 14.68 millimeters here. And then this spring is actually quite a bit taller and also a bit softer than most of the aftermarket springs that you are going to find out there. It is about 28.21 millimeters, or we've got 1.11 inches. So that definitely is a bit taller than even the AVRI or even that patent pending spring that I have on here. Also, the tension screw that is included from the factory is also just a tiny bit taller than those that you commonly find out there. And just to share that with you, that is 1.32 inches or 33.61 millimeters. Now, the next category of upgrades and mods was bridge compatibility. The first category of bridges that I decided to check out were the traditional rocking style bridges, and I've gone on record to say that my personal favorite of that category as of the past year or so has been the offset bridge from our friends over at Offset Guitars UK. It's pretty much a Mustang bridge form factor. The actual bridge posts or legs on that are the same as a lot of other generic aftermarket Mustang and Jazzmaster style bridges. So with that fitting, I noticed also that pretty much every other bridge that is that same form factor, whether it be your cheap bridges like the Kaish /EY guitars /Nova custom guitars, Mustang bridges would drop in and fit here, no issue. The actual genuine Fender 65 reissue Mustang bridge, as well as the AVRI / Vintera Jazzmaster bridges with the threaded saddles also fit here, no problem. Now, as far as more premium aftermarket bridges go, the Bensonite bridge drops in just fine on here. You've also got your Tough Set bridge, which has the narrowest bridge posts or legs of all of them. So that drops in no problem whatsoever. I also tried a fairly new offset bridge option that hit the scene not that long ago, courtesy of my friend Adam, who sells these overpass bridges. And this particular bridge is considered his overpass Goliath bridge. As you can see, it does have offset saddles, which are compensated, unlike the stock saddles on the included Foals F3 bridge. So that is really nice. The overpass Goliath bridge is also made of a high mass brass block, which in this case has been chrome plated. So you've got your nice kind of vintage aesthetic still going on. On the back of this bridge, you can also see that there are channels here that are intended for guitars that maybe have a more severe break angle, and so that prevents your strings from rubbing over the back of the chassis or the bridge base. And this also has, similar to the Mastery and the stock Foals bridge, the ability to remove the bridge posts or the bridge legs. They are affixed using the little screw on the top that looks kind of like a dust cap or a rivet here. And naturally, because of this similarity in design with regards to the detachable bridge posts here, the next category that I would check out would be your fixed bridge or stationary bridge options. These are offset bridges that are not intended to rock. And so I found that this overpass Goliath bridge, as well as their overpass classic bridge, could actually use the stock Foals bridge posts interchangeably, which is awesome because now I'm able to have the overpass Goliath bridge and it does not rock at all. These do come with their own nylon inserts and thimbles when you buy this bridge off of Reverb, but actually having bridge posts that are set to the specific tight tolerance of the thimbles that are already installed on this Foals FJM7 Ultra are just that much better of a solution overall. So that is really nice to see. And also being a very similar design, I found that the Mastery bridge can actually drop into the stock thimbles here. And once you lock them, there's absolutely no play if you install a Mastery bridge into the existing thimbles. So if you do want to upgrade, you do not have to buy the thimbles that Mastery sells on their website. All right, so I do also have the Bell Rock bridge here, which is my stationary bridge of choice for my AV2 66 Jazzmaster here. So if we check the post size, this is 0.308 inches, and in millimeters, that is 7.83 millimeters. And so if we compare that to the Mastery, 7.80 millimeters. So very, very similar. I am pretty darn sure that the Bell Rock bridge would also fit. Yeah, 7.80. It's the same exact diameter as the Mastery, pretty much. So the Bell Rock bridge would also be a drop-in solution. I also tried out the Tough Set Fixie, which is Tough Set's version of a stationary or non-rocking bridge, and those fit just fine as well. So the stock thimbles here pretty much don't need to be switched out for anything, which is another plus for the Foals FJM7 Ultra. Now, the thing that people I think are most curious about, and I checked next, was whether or not the pickguard used here is standard to US spec pickguards, and I am sad to report that unfortunately it is not. And in fact, It took quite a bit of work to get this anodized aluminum US spec guard to fit on the Foals FJM7 Ultra. I'm just going to show you very quickly for reference the difference between the Foals overlaid on top of an American vintage reissue pickguard. So this one here is a genuine Fender. You can see that the Foals is unfortunately just a tiny bit too short at the neck pocket end, and as such, the neck pocket of the Foals is pushed back just enough that there is an overhang by about at least I'd say a millimeter or two that would then need to be shaved off for a US spec pickguard to fit. And so you can imagine that on something like a celluloid or plastic material, that would be a whole lot easier. But I decided from the inception of the idea to mod this thing that I already knew that I wanted to put an anodized guard on here, specifically because of the hum reducing properties that an anodized aluminum pickguard gives you. So I needed to break the Dremel and various files out to get it to fit. It's pretty good overall. I think I overshot a tiny bit over here by the upper part of the neck pocket, which you can barely see. And maybe the tiniest bit on the bottom of it there. But aside from that, you can see that the overall cut of the pickguard is a near perfect match for the actual body shape. So that is a bit disappointing that it took that work to get the guard to fit. Additionally, on top of that, once I finally had this guard on, and I also needed to actually open up the thimble holes a tiny bit to get them to fit over the thimbles here. I also did need to plug the majority of the holes for mounting the pickguard in the body as well, plug them and then re-drill to get this thing to actually line up and fit right. So that is yet another annoying thing that I ran into when trying to upgrade the pickguard. And at this point, I was also fully committed now. And you can see as we line up the Foals and a standard Jazzmaster guard again, I then discovered that the location of the three-way toggle switch, which on the Foals is actually not the same as the typical L-style, switchcraft switch that you will find in most Jazzmasters. It looks like this typically, and instead looks like this. And so because of how the this switch is shaped and its dimensions and where the grounds are supposed to be lined, this did not work in this new pickguard because, yeah, on a standard Fender, if you compare, the hole for the three-way toggle switch is a lot lower than it is on the Foals switch, which is pushed up to accommodate this kind of switch. So that was really annoying because I wasn't expecting or planning to actually to swap out the three-way toggle switch, because the one that they included, from the factory, at least in operation, was good enough as is. But I ended up needing to swap that, and because I was under there and doing that already, and because I was curious at that point what this thing would sound like with proper Jazzmaster specs for our lead circuit pots, I did swap out the stock 250K pots and 0.047 UF capacitor, which are the standard specs that you would find on a Strat or a Telecaster, for example, with the correct 1 meg linear pot in for the volume and the 1 meg audio pot, along with a vintage Russian paper and oil 0.033 UF capacitor. Some folks had pointed out the slight difference in tone that I was getting from this in my demos. And the other thing that folks were pointing out was the specific construction on the Foals, which I still think that some of the folks that were saying that these look more like Strat pickups were kind of dead wrong about that. Now, as compared to traditional Jazzmaster pickups, and to the left here, I have a pickup that is wound by EP Custom Pickups. You can see that the coil wind pretty much fills up the entire span of the bobbin, whereas it is a bit shy of that on the Foals here, right? And so people were saying, oh, this is much more like an old Fender Japan pickup, which isn't true. The coils on the old Fender Japan pickups were even narrower, like quite literally, and also taller on the old Fender Japan ones. The Foals one is a bit taller than the EP Custom one, right? But that really isn't that much of a deal breaker. You can see it's not that dissimilar, right? And if we compare the Foals to one of the pickups by our friends over at Tone Hatch Pickups, you can see that the discrepancy in height is a little bit more noticeable here, right? I'd say that that's probably at least a millimeter taller than the Tone Hatch one. And you can see also on the Tone Hatch one that the coil winding here does also fill most of the span of the width of the bobbins here, whereas the Foals is just a couple millimeters shy on either side. Now, this is a bit interesting. In comparison to a genuine Fender pure vintage 65 pickup, you will see that the Fender also does not actually span the majority of the bobbins width as well. In fact, it looks very, very similar in width to the Foals. So, and also the overall height of the pure vintage 65, if you can see, is pretty much exactly the same. I think that, and I'm not messing around here, you can see that they are almost identical, and the only difference here is that the Foals is using, on their spec sheet, they say that this is a German-made copper wire, whereas this one, I believe, is a plain enamel wire here. So that is really kind of funny. You can see very clearly, and you know that this is one of the pure vintage ones because it's got the little blue dot there. They usually have a little blue and red dot to signify which pickup goes where. So yeah, there you go. If anything, maybe the Foals is just the tiniest bit, not even a whole millimeter taller, and for sure the pure vintage coil wind is not filling up the entire pickup in the same way as the EP Custom and Tone Hatch ones do. So there you go. And no doubt, I am just going to go ahead and go on record. I've been impressed with Tone Hatch's pickups ever since I did my comprehensive review of all of the Mustang pickups that Tone Hatch offers. And my favorite from that bunch was also the 2.5 Union pickups. Now, the 2.5 Unions are basically use Alnico 2 for your treble strings, which retains that woody kind of vintage quality, and also kind of helps to tame down some of that ice pick, because these are the Alnico 2s are a little bit darker than the sound that you are going to get from your Alnico 5s. And then for your bass strings, they are using Alnico 5 pickups to keep the bass tighter overall, and not kind of as mushy or as flabby sounding as sometimes Alnico 2s can get. The best of both worlds of kind of vintage meets modern, but still very much decidedly Jazzmaster. And I'm going to share my thoughts overall with you with regards to how I think these sound, again, as compared to what I was experiencing with the stock Foals pickups. Now, with the switch and the pickups and the pots and all of that finally installed, I redirected my attention to the tuners, right? And the stock tuners on this guitar were really quite good. For me, the thing that I am not into with modern style tuners in general is just the string through kind of design for the posts. You know, your string needs to go through the hole in the post, and I much prefer to have the kind of split shaft, right? The split tuner design where the string actually goes into the tuner. And for me, that's much easier, right? And it's cleaner when you actually cut the string. You don't have any sharp pieces of string coming out. Guitars like those that have a Floyd Rose on them, I could also see them being you know, good for guitars that have like a Bigsby. It's so annoying to restring a Bigsby, and so having a locking tuner can be an advantage in that situation. But yeah, overall, I think it was worthwhile. And because also, for me, the Goto SD91 tuners are the gold standard, right? The advantage that the Foals tuners had, though, is that they are a 21-to-1 gear ratio, so they definitely were a bit more precise, and you can feel the difference, too. But these ones here are a 15-to-1 gear ratio, which is a tiny bit behind that. But I'm comfortable. These feel like home to me. They string up in a way that's more comfortable to me. And also the additional weight savings. So I like the fact that I did that. Was it necessary? Absolutely not. But it's something that I personally would want on my own Jazzmaster. Now, the last thing that I did was to swap out the string trees. I was not a fan of the stock string trees. I think they looked a bit goofy to me. They sat really high and they had roller mechanisms. And for me personally, as far as string trees are concerned, or really any hardware is concerned, the more moving parts you have, the less desirable for my personal taste, right? And so I understand, you know, the thought process and the decision making behind having roller string trees up there. Some might see it as kind of like a pro feature. But yeah, these old vintage style butterfly string trees here, these ones are from All Parts. They're cheap. They're good. Aesthetically, they just look better to me, right? And also, I would say that it's easier to access the truss rod with these smaller string trees than it was to have those huge ones that were on here prior. So yeah, after swapping out all of those parts, I then gave it a setup again. I actually salvaged the stock strings because strings are expensive these days, and the ones that they included are pretty decent, you know, out of the box. And there was enough length to make them work with the Goto SD91 tuners. So I said, why the hell not? So with all of those upgrades done, the only thing left to do now is hear how this thing actually sounds. Does it actually sound that much better than the stock Foals? And how does this sound now as compared to, say, our Vintera III Jazzmaster back here? Because that is the thing that a lot of people find to be unbelievable. They think that I'm just shilling, that I'm somehow making bank or being paid off by Foals to, you know, to talk up and exaggerate about this guitar, but I'm really not. I mean, again, the AV266 Jazzmaster that I have back there is a $3,000 guitar. That is something that I spent my own money on. I even spent money to get it refinished by my boy Caleb at Show Me Nitro Finishes. I spent a ridiculous amount of money on that the reproduction tortoiseshell guard on that thing. So it is a mad expensive guitar. And do you think that it pleasures me to say that a $600 that a less than $600 guitar, you know, gets within a couple stone throws of that guitar? Of course not, right? So I can understand why people get emotionally charged over this stuff, but all I can say is, guys, I mean, I am in a unique position. This is something that I told folks in the comments. I'm in a unique position that I am an offset specialist in New York City. So I am seeing at least a dozen, and more often than that, it's more like 20 of these offset guitars coming into my shop every single month, right? So, and that includes both old and new offset guitars. Okay. So I have a real world experience. I get to see what makes them tick. I get to see what the most common issues are with them. And then on top of the stuff that I'm getting from clients, I also have, you know, my connection with Zounds, and they send me new guitars on loan for review. So I get to see what these things are like, brand new out of the box. And I'm not lying, folks. I don't know. I don't know how it's possible that this guitar is as good as it is. In fact, you know what? Let's go ahead and put my money where my mouth is. The thing that I was so impressed by with the Foals was the fretwork, and in particular, the fret end dressing on this guitar. And this is something that I typically do when I get a client's guitar in, okay? Where I do kind of my play on Phil McKnight's, you know, stocking test to test the fret sprout on the guitar. And I have had this Foals for just about as long as that Vintera III Jazzmaster back there. I got that thing a day after the launch day, right? Zounds was awesome and sent it to me. So I've got my identical 2 pieces of paper towel here. Basically, I'm just gonna rub the edge of this thing, you know, with moderate pressure, and I should be getting tearing here, which I'm not, okay? So you can just see from the other side, there is no tearing happening whatsoever on here. We can replicate that on the other side, and you can hear that I am, I'm not doing this lightly. I'm really rubbing up against it with force. And you can see that I'm not getting any tearing. Okay, now let's do the same thing, which I've had the Vintera again. That's been just about a month now, not a little over a month. I wasn't feeling fret sprout on this when I first got it, right? But as it goes with the Vintera line, for some reason, and I'm not sure what it is, they feel like the most susceptible to getting fret sprout. And it hasn't been exceptionally dry or anything in New York either, right? There's been a lot of rain, a lot of humid days here in New York already. So let's go ahead and do that same test here. I'm doing the same exact thing I was doing before. I'm already feeling stuff. And there you go. Tearage. Tearage. Do the same thing on the other side. Same thing. You can hear that I'm applying the same pressure. I'm trying not to cut myself, but yep, we're tearing. Okay, so there you go. Real world effing proof that I am not full of shit, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? That should speak for itself with regards to, at minimum, the quality of the fret end dressing on the Foals as compared to the Vintera III, right? And then the other thing to consider too is, again, the thing that people gripe about is the quality of the Rosewood boards on the Fenders kind of being in an unfinished state. Now, this is definitely not as bad. This is an improvement over what we were getting, I would say, on the Vintera II guitars, which had a pretty bad, like really, really rough. For comparison's sake here, I'll show you the board on my Vintera II Mustang. And this, I've treated it somewhat already. I put oil on this board and such, but you can still see that it's got kind of a rough, dry quality to it. definitely was way rougher stock before I did anything to it. Okay. And then if we compare this to the Foals, which I still haven't applied any oil or anything to, you can just see that there's a sheen here. There's that waxy kind of quality that I mentioned in the deep dive that that just makes this feel like it is retaining a lot more moisture overall and just feels like healthier or something. It just feels like the pre-2018 Rosewood. So anyway, enough gabbing. I've been talking for enough time. The last thing left to do is see, with all of these mods, and especially with the pickups, is this thing going to sound closer to a traditional Jazzmaster now, right? And how does it compare tone-wise to this Vintera III Jazzmaster? Which of these sound better? And mind you, the tone hatch pickups that are in this are not expensive. These are the 2.5 unit pickups. These are $89.95, these pickups. Hand wound in the United States with premium materials, okay? Vintage accurate pickups. $89.95. How do they stack up? Because so far, and we'll tally all of the upgrades up on this, so far, this is still, even fully upgraded, significantly cheaper than the Vintera III Jazzmaster. So let's go ahead and plug this in, see what it sounds like. And the first thing that I want you to notice here is just how quiet the guitar is when it's in the center position here, okay? This is supposed to be hum canceling after all, and no doubt, in combination with the meticulously well done body shielding that this Foals has, the anodized aluminum guard here is also doing a pretty good job. But this, right now, this middle position sound is near identical, I feel like, to what we were getting in the stock configuration that I shared in the deep dive review. Now, when we switch over to our bridge only position, you can hear the 60 cycle hum for sure. Okay. And then when we switch over to the neck only position, yes, you can hear it. Okay. And then when we switch to the rhythm circuit, you can hear it, but it's kind of attenuated, toned down a bit. Okay. Now let's plug in the Vintera III Jazzmaster and see how that compares. Now, I was very transparent with you all that I'm pretty sure the shielding paint in this guitar is doing absolutely nothing. So let's just go ahead and see. So this is the center position on this. And you can hear quite a bit more of that room noise, the noise that I'm getting from the lights and whatnot here. Okay? And it goes away too. It changes pretty significantly. And that's not a grounding issue. I will leave a link down below to something that explains why that's not a grounding issue. The fact that the noise is going away is actually telling us that we're perfectly grounded here. Okay, but then when we go to our bridge only, that is a sharp sounding 60 cycle hum. That is buzzy as fuck right now, right? And then the neck only. Okay. And then tone down again for our rhythm circuit. But no doubt the 60 cycle hum on the Vintera III Jazzmaster, which is $1,350, is significantly worse, even as compared to the Foals when it was stock. Again, watch the full deep dive video on the Foals if you haven't seen it already, because I show this same exact thing. We're going to plug in now, and we're actually going to do a head-to-head, because I meant to do this the last time, but let's just see now that this is closer in spec to the Vintera III Jazzmaster, having, by the accounts of folks out there who were critical of the stock pickups, a more traditional Jazzmaster pickup and wiring setup here. Compare it to the sound back to back against the Vintera III Jazzmaster. All right, so a couple of thoughts just in the back-to-back. These tone hatch pickups are friggin' awesome. I definitely think it does bring the sound, in combination with the 1 meg pots, brings back that bit of that sparkle, that shimmering top end that we all love out of that classic Jazzmaster tone. Now, no doubt, the Vintera 3, as I said in the full review of it, sounds awesome, right? And I definitely think, and this is why I advocate for some folks to give that stock threaded saddle bridge a chance, but that jangliness that you are getting is just not something that you are going to get on a fixed bridge kind of situation. If anything, bridges like the Mastery bridge, like this Overpass Goliath bridge, the stock Foals bridge, the Bell Rock, all of those ones, and depending, of course, too, on the saddle material, that is going to give you kind of a more hardtail kind of tone. Definitely not as airy sounding. And that is something that I really, really love about the traditional Jazzmaster bridge. I've gone on record to say it time and again, there's nothing quite like it as far as the aftermarket options go that will get you that same kind of tone. And I really think that it comes down to the fact that the threaded saddle Jazzmaster bridge doesn't actually have any slots, in particular for your bass strings to actually sit on. They are just sitting on top of those threads. And I think that's giving us that more airy, shimmering, jangly kind of quality. Now, that said, I do find these to be a worthwhile upgrade if you are chasing a more traditional Jazzmaster tone. If you get one of these Foals FJM7 Ultras. I actually regret not having the time or even the foresight to think about maybe swapping just the pots first, because I unfortunately had a very limited time to produce this video this week, but I didn't have the foresight to see what the stock Foals pickups sounded like with just 1 meg pots swapped. If those would have made the stock pickups sound more Jazzmaster-ish. If I were to guess, they definitely would. And maybe I will follow up again out of my own curiosity when I can find the time. We'll follow up and put the stock Foals pickup back in and see how they sound with the 1 meg and 0.03 capacitor configuration here. And again, how quiet this is, regardless of whether I'm touching strings or not. Almost no discernible difference between the two, unlike on the Vintera 3. Now I'm going to be playing the same riffs that I played in the Foals deep dive demo video. So again, you can go back and check to see how the tones between this and the stock pickups compare. We are back on the bridge pickup, no change to the amp settings here. Yeah, that definitely sounds much more jangly and shimmery and sparkly to me than the stock Foals pickups. I definitely feel like the Tone Hatch 2.5 Union pickups just have a much smoother tone to them, especially as the amp is breaking up. So that is definitely nice to see, and is showing that, you know, if you are chasing an even better tone than what the stock Foals pickups offered, that the Tone Hatch are a really great, you know, affordable option. All right, we're on the neck pickup now, with the amp still at almost about 7, and we've kicked up the reverb a bit for the vibes. Volume and tone are still at 10. We are on our rhythm circuit now. We've got the volume and tone at 10. Turned the amp back down to about 5, and also toned down that reverb a bit. I gotta say, this guitar is definitely somewhat transformed after those upgrades. And I think the most meaningful of the upgrades is no doubt the pickups here. I really, really dig these Tone Hatch 2.5 Union pickups. I definitely think that they got us more into that ballpark of the vintage Jazzmaster tone. I really do think that the 250K pots in the stock configuration with that 0.047 UF capacitor was also kind of throwing a little bit of a blanket over the tone and making people's perceptions, at least those of you who commented that it does, you know, sound quite a bit different from the Jazzmaster tone that you're used to, had a big part in that as well. So yeah, again, I will try to follow up with maybe just like a YouTube short or an Instagram reel where I show what those pickups sound like with the new 1 meg linear pot in the volume and the 1 meg audio pot in the tone, with the vintage accurate 0.03 UF capacitor. Now, with the rest of the other upgrades, as I was stating before, I definitely think that the pickguard here is making a difference. I've said time and again that an anodized aluminum pickguard, if you still want to retain your true single coil Jazzmaster or Jaguar or Mustang pickups, or whatever kind of, you know, single coil guitar you have, that an anodized aluminum pickguard is the best way to make a meaningful difference with regards to that. Obviously, you do need to actually have a complete Faraday cage, though. So that includes having, you know, a fully shielded body. I do not think, unfortunately, like I said in the full review of the Vintera 3, that their sorry excuse for shielding paint is going to cut it in that instance. I'm definitely not going to cut it where there's no shielding at all in the body on the Vintera 2s. Yeah, you need to have all of that in place for it to make that big of a difference. And so I do find that to be worthwhile. But as I said again, it was a major effing pain to do it. Not major. It didn't take me more than an hour. But it just sucks that they had to go with kind of proprietary spec for the design, because otherwise, as I said before, it pretty much lines up perfectly with the contours of the body. So I don't know if that was kind of, a move where they want people to buy alternate pickguards from them, which would be confusing because they really only offer that perloid as well as kind of like a reddish lava or molten lava tort that they're calling it on the website, and there isn't even mint green or parchment or black or any of those other colors, which is surprising because they actually do make guitars that have those pickguard options available. With regards to some of the other modifications that we made, for sure, the Switchcraft three-way switch here is more high quality than the one that is included on this stock. Was it a necessary change? In this case, it was a necessary change because, again, the pickguard here, the US spec pickguards, that switch is situated lower, and either the cut of the route here is different from how it is on a traditional Jazzmaster or a vintage accurate Jazzmaster, or something about it makes it so that this stock switch doesn't work here. So yeah, that was necessary to do, and it definitely feels just like a smoother overall. It doesn't have as robust of a click, and I don't think that people necessarily want to have to apply more force to engage the position that you want. So that is nice. I didn't do anything to the rhythm circuit here because it was fine. Now, the overpass Goliath bridge here is definitely a very nice upgrade. I like the tone of it, but I liked the tone of the stock bridge as well. And I liked the feel of the stock bridge as well. And my own personal opinion here is I feel like I'm actually probably going to move this bridge over to a guitar where it's going to make a much more meaningful change, such as like my Shell Pink Classic Vibe 60s Squire Jaguar, where the bridge leaves a bit to be desired. The other thing that I do like in the base of the bridge are these kinds of slightly recessed grooves, and those are to make sure that the saddles literally cannot have any lateral movement. And the other advantage, of course, is the fact that this does have those offset compensated saddles for more fine intonation on here. As I said in the deep dive review of the Foals, the stock bridge was really good even without compensated saddles. I wasn't having issues, but if you are using a wound G, the overpass bridge here is unique in that if you flip the orientation of that middle saddle, this bridge does work with a wound G. And that is something that not even the Mastery bridge has an answer to. So that is really, really cool. But overall, I think if you're looking for an affordable Jazzmaster bridge option that can be set to either rock or be fixed in place, whether you are using the included nylon inserts that come with this bridge, or whether you are affixing it to the the stock posts that come with the bridge on the Foals, that it is a fantastic option. The one with the stainless steel saddles, like this one here, of the Goliath bridge, is $110. The plain steel saddle version is like $95, and he's also got a brass saddle version. So definitely check out his Reverb store, which I have linked down below. And thank you to Adam for sending the overpass Goliath bridge to me for review. The other things that made a difference here, I think a noticeable difference, I would say, is definitely the spring. I liked the spring as it was stock in this Foals F2 tremolo system here. I liked that it was far more responsive, took less actuation force to actually whammy on the thing. But there's a reason why the patent pending vibratos, from Fender back in the day are so sought after. And it's because it does give me a bit more tension here. It still feels nice and soft and springy, but just that additional bit of tension feels really nice and makes this unit feel even more high quality. If you want to jump down the rabbit hole of playing around with various springs, whether it be on a Foals tremolo or other Jazzmaster and Jaguar tremolos that you might have on your guitars, I highly suggest that you check out my buddy Mark B's video where he did a crazy deep dive and started searching around to see if he could find an aftermarket spring that you can buy for a fairly cheap price that emulates or gets really close to the famed patent pending springs like the one that I use here. Now, the last thing that I wanted to cover is both the tuners and the replacement of the string trees here. As I said before, I love the Goto SD91 tuners, but I definitely can feel that they are not as precise as the stock Foals tuners. I'm getting a tiny bit of slippage here that I wasn't experiencing at all on the stock Foals locking tuners, but still, it is a worthwhile upgrade for me personally. Even though I don't change strings all that often, when I go to do it, I definitely much prefer the split shaft design of the old, Kluson / Goto style vintage tuners. That and the additional weight savings, as I had mentioned before. Now, in the end, if we enumerate how much all of these mods costed, we got about 90 bucks for the pickups, right? 110 bucks for the bridge, $30 for the Switchcraft switch, $20 for the pots. I got this pickguard here from Amazon. Definitely not the best. The Herod anodized aluminum pickguards are way better quality. This thing was just shy of $30. So let's just say this was $25 here. I already had these knobs, so they kind of were free. But if you're trying to get comparable knobs, let's just say you could find them for like $5, right? The pickup covers were probably like 10 or 15 bucks. And then the capacitor, for me, I buy them in bulk, so this capacitor by itself was about $5. The tuners are about, $35. The string trees were $5. So 330 bucks. Now add that to the cost of the guitar itself, which is just about $600, right? So for less than $1,000, we've got this, right? The next closest thing that Fender is offering would have been like the Player II Jazzmaster, and I'm just going to go ahead and say this is so much better of a guitar than the Player II Jazzmaster. As compared to the Vintera III Jazzmaster back there are things about the Vintera III that I do like better than this guitar. Just the fact that it is a more vintage accurate kind of guitar, I like better, but I like the neck profile here much more than I like the thicker neck profile on the Vintera III. I like all of the hardware, even as it was stock, better than the Vintera III. And now with that $90 pickup upgrade on this, I do think that it sounds neck and neck, if not, I really like these tone hatch pickups a lot. I feel like if you like the shimmering thing that you were getting more from the Vintera III as you heard it, that really comes down to the rocking vintage style bridge. It really affects the tone heavily. So I'd say sound wise, they're kind of neck and neck. But yeah, $400 cheaper for this one, fully upgraded. And did it actually need all of this stuff? No. No, it didn't need all of this. Really, this was an exercise in fulfilling and feeding my curiosity. Am I going to be reverting this back to stock? No, I like the aesthetics of this better, and I like the mods that I did on this and makes this one here that much more special. Anyway, I think that is going to do it for this video, folks. I hope you found it enjoyable as well as informative, especially if you recently bought a Foals. Maybe you're waiting for it to come in. Maybe you are one of the offset guitar crazed maniacs that, when you purchase a new guitar, you're already searching for the things that you want to change, that you want to upgrade, that you want to mod. And so if you are that person, I hope this guide here is helpful to you. If you've already done some mods on your Foals FJM7 Ultra, or even if you have an FJG7, their Jaguar, I would love to hear from you down in the comments. What kind of mods did you do, and what kind of changes did you see from doing those mods, and was it worth it for you? Definitely let me know. That is super valuable information that is very much welcome by not only me, but everybody else who watches this channel. If you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell to be notified of new videos as soon as they drop. And don't forget to follow Totally Wired Guitars for more offset guitars modding tips.